which kind of constitution does Nigeria operate that puts the guns in the hands of the Fulani in monopoly, such that they can roam with AK-47 all over the room freely, with AK-47 all over the place, while those the people they are killing cannot access any weapon. What Iran did to attract the military actions going on in their place now is exactly what Nigeria is doing. So many of us do not understand the gravity of what we're talking about. Yes, a few days ago we heard from Washington where Ambassador Sam Brownback was summarizing the U.S. prognosis of Nigeria as at now, the Nigeria in which terrorists are overrunning the whole place, attacking military bases, abducting people in hundreds, and just carrying on unchallenged. And Ambassador Sam Brownback, presiding over the congressional briefing in which the U.S. was now summarizing its findings concerning the widespread killings happening in Nigeria on a genocidal scale. We recall that President Trump had mandated Congressman Riley Moore to go in to see what was going on in Nigeria. And Riley Moore had come with his delegation. They went to the places of incidents and came back, made their preliminary report, took some more testimonies from those who may have one thing or the other they know concerning what was going on in Nigeria. Of course, the government of Nigeria came denying that there was genocide. Bishop Cook has said no Christian genocide. The governor in Benue, a Catholic priest, says earlier, says nothing of such was happening. But the victims were also invited to give their own testimonies, particularly the ones around Benue. We recall the one at Yelwata and all the ones that followed. They all came in their turns in Washington to tell their side of the story. We saw when the Nigerian government sent their so-called lobbyists to go and peddle lies in Washington, $9 million scattered. We saw when Remi Tinubu went in. We saw the interview where she was saying she doesn't believe there's any such thing as genocidal killings going on. And so it was against this backdrop, the reason we had to piece it all together for our better understanding is that if we do not understand what the U.S. is saying, their military already here, their mission already stated, their objectives and targets already listed. They are pointing at the Fulani conquest invasion that is behind the entire killing, jihad style. They are pointing at the constitution of Nigeria that enable the Fulani to do what they are doing, because I'm sure some of us heard at the hearings, during the hearings in Washington, the congressional hearings on Nigeria, some of us observed when the question was raised, which kind of constitution does Nigeria operate that puts the guns in the hands of the Fulani in monopoly, such that they can roam with AK-47 all over the room freely, with AK-47 all over the place, while those the people they are killing cannot access any weapon. So these are the things that will tell anybody who cares to listen, and damn anyone who will not listen, because what the U.S. is talking about is something of their national security concern. When you hear country of particular concern, what Iran did to attract the military actions going on in their place now is exactly what Nigeria is doing. So many of us do not understand the gravity of what we're talking about. That country of particular concern designation is one in which it is the breeding of terror for global export. That was what Iran did. That was what Nigeria did that warranted the designation as country of political concern in year 2020. Nigeria was designated along with Iran in that year, 2020. These military actions that are taking place, let's even limit ourselves to the one of Nigeria. The decision to follow up with military action was also taken in June of 2020 after the CPC designation in March. We will recall that it was in 2019 that the NINAS team I was privileged to lead had gone to Washington to raise alarm about the Fulani conquest invasion being executed jihad-style ethnic cleansing, in which the owners of the lands that they targeted were being eliminated on a scale, or you could call ethnic cleansing. And so we began to tell the U.S. what we knew about the entire matter, that the terror networks of the Middle East were converging in our space, and that our president, our government led by Buhari at the time, was the one receiving them and equipping them and reinforcing them, and we began to see the escalation of their activities, and we then began to share with the U.S. what we knew about the mechanisms by which they're able to prevail on such a scale. And we pointed at our constitution, the constitution of Nigeria that was imposed by that caliphate, as the enabler for what they were doing. And when we had done with dismantling the false narratives, because the government of Nigeria, as they had always done, lying about everything, the government of Nigeria was lying to the whole world that it was a matter of climate change, and the farmers and herders clash that arose from pastoral leaders, the herders that had to come further hinterland in search of pasture, all known to them to be lies. And then we went on to the matter of communal clash, because that was what the police were saying. Every time a community is invaded, they will say it is the next community that came. And then there was one in which they said there's poverty in the Northeast, that because power went southward, that everybody was left poor. And therefore, if all the monies available in the world concentrated in the Northeast, we remember when Buhari said every international development capital available should be concentrated on the Northeast. So there were 4 false narratives we had to dismantle. It fell on me to get on that task on Capitol Hill in the committee at the House of Representatives, chaired by Congressman Chris Smith, and then in the Senate committee chaired by Ted Cruz. It took a whole 7 months in that 2019, from January to the end of July, for the U.S., all the agencies of the U.S. The government involved, and the ambassador, this same ambassador, Sam Brown, back then ambassador at large for the U.S. Commission for International Religious Freedom. He chaired the sessions, like as you can see in the picture there. That's Brownback right there. And so we came to where it became very clear to the U.S. what was going on, that it was a conquest invasion by Fulani, and that it was being done in joint venture with the terror networks of the Middle East that are now relocated to Nigeria because they were being pushed out of the Middle East, and that their intention was to establish that kind of, in joint venture, to establish that kind of caliphate that they tried to establish between Iraq and Syria in the Middle East, such that Fulani, having eliminated the indigenous peoples of the territory we call Nigeria, will become, the Nigeria will still be in place, but now a Fulani country. And the terror networks will have a sovereign space to function uninhibited, like they are doing in Afghanistan now. And in that landing, they will swallow up Niger Republic, Mali, and Burkina Faso, collapse everything into one. It was just the Nigerian end they were trying to conclude by the time we made that intervention in 2019. So we're sharing all this with you so that you can have a fuller picture of what we're dealing with. And now, from that CPC designation of 2020, elections happened in November of 2020, and Biden came in. The first thing Biden would do after being sworn in January of 2021 was to remove Nigeria from that, CPC list. And so, for the 4 years that followed, it was we were struggling with them to put Nigeria back, because the killings did not abate. It actually increased. Through the period of COVID, we saw when Buhari threw our borders open and Fulani had to pour in from everywhere. He put Pantami in charge, Issa Pantami, to document them as Nigerians, and they were just, being, dispersed, being circulated, being put in our forests with all the weapons that came with them. We remember when Iran, when weapons were found at Apapa ports in such a quantity, and it turned out to have originated from Iran, going to the terrorists that were set it, because we have 8 of the groups now operating in Nigeria. We have Boko Haram, we have ISWAP, we have Lakarua, whatever they call it now, the Fulani Herdsmen, all kinds of groups affiliated with ISIS and Al-Qaeda. And so, having come to where there was a clear understanding of what was going on and what was facilitating it, it was the unitary constitution of Nigeria imposed by that caliphate since 1979 that has enabled them to do all of what they are doing against the rest of the Nigerians. And so the U.S. now began to listen to what we said was the what we proposed as a solution, that it was the taking down of that constitution, that will hold the key to disarming, to taking the guns back from those who are committing the terror, and that it will immediately also put those who have been overrun in a position to organize their own security and the other things they need to organize by themselves as a federation. And so it became something that the U.S. had to process into policy actions. And that was how the CPC designation that was put in March of 2020 came about. Then I already talked about the election that happened in November, in which Biden came and disrupted everything. But luckily, President Trump comes back in 2025 and had to reinstate that designation of CPC, and then restarted the military action that was already decided in consequence of that that designation. And that's how we got to where we are. Now that Trump's mandate, Riley Moore and his team are reported back to the executive branch, and Congress had done all its hearings, what happened on Wednesday, the 25th of March 2026 in Washington was like a summary of what the U.S. had found out concerning the killings happening in Nigeria and what they were going to do about it. Because they had investigated, they had listened to all the testimonies, they've submitted their reports. They only want the Americans to know why the U.S. is in Nigeria, particularly the U.S. military that has been, from that, December 25th bombing of 2025. Further equipment have been sent in. The reports were all over the place, and the troops are now here. Of course, Iran became bad, and they had to attend more to Iran. But the Nigerians that are here, let it be clear to us that it is U.S. national security concern that is happening in our space. The terror networks that are breeding here are for global export, and U.S. will be the first destination of that export. And so they are here to take on those terror networks. They've already told us they will be going after the sponsors. They told the Nigerian government, come along, let's go take out the networks. Come along, let's find out who the sponsors are. And when we begin to think of who and who could be the sponsors, we begin to listen to what people in government are saying concerning people who are supposed to be in charge of taking out that terror. The National Security Advisor, they call Nuhu Ribadu, We saw when he went about saying that the terrorists, did he say they are his brothers? Because they are not my brothers. The terrorists are the brothers of the National Security Advisor, and he says we should rehabilitate them and reintegrate them. We heard the Chief of Defense Staff, the current Chief of Defense Staff, not Musa, the one that I don't know his name, I can't remember his name now. He says that the terrorists are like prodigal sons, and we only need to allow them time to repent and then be useful again. That is the Chief of Defense Staff of Nigeria. That's his response to what the killings that are happening on this kind of scale we have seen, in which military bases have been overrun, commanders of those military bases being killed, people being abducted in hundreds, and ransoms being demanded in billions of naira and dollar. And so we come down to Gumi, that if anybody was in doubt about the government's complicity in all of it, Gumi says that every time he goes to talk with them in the forest, that government security team goes with him. So the government knows where these terrorists are. Then we come down to, what's his name again? The one that says it's Sultan in Sokoto, saying that Sharia, nobody can talk about Sharia. Meanwhile, the US also mentions Sharia specifically as some of those things, because that's what provides the forest for this marauding. That is, you know how pickpockets create commotion so that they can do their picking of pocket. That is how Sharia, is in this terror business. If the US therefore pointed particularly at Sharia, that must be taken away from the arena. And everything, whether it is the guns that are in the hands of Fulani monopoly, or the Sharia that is the marauding forests for driving the jihad, it is the Constitution of Nigeria that holds everything in place. It is that Constitution of Nigeria that has to go down. So anybody who is wondering what the US is coming to do here, taking down that Constitution is central to what they have to do to remove the guns from the hands of the terrorists. Let's hear it again. Taking out that Constitution, taking down that Constitution is central to what has to happen for the guns to be retrieved from the hands of those who are using it to create the terror we are living in. And so we then go to what is the commander-in-chief saying or doing about all of this. Of course, the US already told them that it is clear that they're not doing enough, if they are doing anything at all. But whatever they are doing is grossly inadequate. And so when your NSA, when your National Security Advisor is saying that the terrorists are his brothers and our brothers, when your CDA, Chief of Defense Staff, is saying that they are prodigal sons that should be allowed opportunity to repent, meanwhile they are not stopping to be allowed. That is, if they have stopped, and we are now wondering what to do with them for the ones they had done, that's a different thing. But they are killing and coming on such a scale that there are communities there are people that are alive today as we are speaking, who will be dead by this time tomorrow because they've been overrun. And we're not talking about 5 or 10 people. When they sack a whole community, you'll be be looking for who is left. And so they are not stopping. And we are saying that they have to be given time to be, that's our response to them. The commander-in-chief, who has retained this National Security Advisor, who the other day, they caught people in Kwara area. You can see what is going on in that Kwara area now. They caught people with weapons in the Kwara area. And Nuhu Ribadu says he was the one that gave them the weapons. So why are we looking for where the terror is coming from? It is from inside government. It is from inside government at that topmost level, going by what they are saying, going by what we are seeing. And so that commander-in-chief that will retain Nuhu Ribadu as his National Security Advisor, that commander-in-chief that will retain the Chief of Defense Staff, who says that people who are killing other people are just prodigal sons that should be allowed time to repent. That commander-in-chief is complicit by his retention of such principal officers in the security architecture of the country. And then we look at Gumi. Why is Gumi not being held accountable for his role in whatever these people are doing? Why is the Sultan talking about Sharia that must be kept in place when that Sharia has been identified as completely it's something that cannot cohabit with democracy, with constitutionalism. It requires people to kill other people from what we have lived with for so many years. So the sanctity of life is compromised by the presence of Sharia, which is why those who want to see an end to that terror and its derivatives are saying that it has to go. And so the purpose of these brokers is to clarify the situation to those in Nigeria who will be affected when the U.S. operations concerning the terror that we are breeding in our space will commence, so that they don't say, they don't begin to claim. That's the prognosis coming from Washington, is that Nigeria will disintegrate violently. That was the summary of what Bramberg was telling us, that in the face of these killings and in the face of what the government is doing or failing to do, that it will only come to where those who are being slaughtered are going to find out that will be compelled to do things that will result in the violent disintegration of Nigeria. Ninas had been warning about this. If anybody wants to know, go back to 2019, the video of the alarm we went to raise in Washington. It was the theme of it was Nigeria at breaking point. If you go to listen to what we said then and what Ambassador Sam Bromberg said on the 25th of March in 2026, you will see that what we warned about is what is happening now. The prescription we advanced is what had been adopted as a solution. Take out this constitution, rework the basis of this union. That's where we think people need to get to be able to relate with what is about to come. If we are not paying attention, we're just going to be victims, we're just going to be collateral damage in the field. But we think that people should now pay attention, because it won't be long before the time will run out to even do anything. We must play the part we need to play to side with those who want an end to the terror and those who want to perpetrate it or continue it forever. We stop there.